Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword. Today we are looking at the full story of Boromir.
Build me an army worthy of Gondor.
Boromir, the captain of the White Tower and the son of Denethor II. Boromir was a tall man, standing at an impressive 6 foot 4 inches tall, or 193 centimeters, for whichever way that you prefer your measurements. He had dark hair, grey, stern eyes, and a noble face. But there was much that happened before he was described like this in his first appearance at the Council of Elrond in The Lord of the Rings. So, let us rewind a bit first and go back to the earliest days of his life. Boromir was born in the year 2978 of the Third Age to his parents Denethor II and Finduilas. Denethor was the 26th and last but one ruling steward of Gondor before the return of Aragorn after the War of the Ring. He was a proud and valiant ruler who let his thirst for knowledge be his downfall after using one of the Palantiri to try and gain knowledge and challenge the will of Sauron. And despite holding up very well in this battle, it did take a lasting toll on his body and mind. Then, as for Boromir's mother, Finduilas, she was the sister of Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth from the times of the War of the Ring. She was named after the elf of the First Age, for she had a gentle heart and was very beautiful. Boromir would not know much of his mother though, as she died when he was just 10 years old in the year 2988. With his brother Faramir being born in the middle of these dates in 2983, and Finduilas grew weaker in the years following his birth. Boromir would come into the years of his teens without a mother and with a father who grew ever more remote and grim, but that did not stop Boromir becoming a great man and warrior. So time drew on to the War of the Ring, and the sons of Denethor grew to manhood. Boromir, 5 years the elder, beloved by his father, was like him in face and pride, but in little else. Rather he was a man after the sort of King Eomer of old, taking no wife, and delighting chiefly in arms, fearless and strong, but caring little for lore, save the tales of old battles. Now for those of you who may not be sure just who this King Eomer that Boromir is being compared to is, a quick summary would show him as the 33rd and last king of Gondor before the lines of the ruling stewards took charge instead. He took part in the wars against Angmar that were led by the Witch King. After one battle, the Witch King challenged Eomer to single combat and was initially ignored. However, 7 years after this first challenge, he goaded him once again, and this time Eomer could not be talked down. He took just a small escort of knights and rode to Minas Morgul where the Witch King held strong. Here they entered the gates, but none of that party were ever to be seen again. There is obviously more detail of the life of King Eomer, but that full story is one for another day, so if you would like that in a video, let me know that in the comments below. But anyway, as you can see, growing up being compared to the kind of man that at that time was the most recent king of Gondor was definitely a great compliment. As for Boromir again though, if we dive back into Appendix A of The Lord of the Rings, we get a bit more information on his younger years, along with his relationship with both his brother Faramir and father Denethor. Yet between the brothers there was great love, and had been since childhood, when Boromir was the helper and protector of Faramir. No jealousy or rivalry had arisen between them since, for their father's favour or for the praise of men. It did not seem possible to Faramir that anyone in Gondor could rival Boromir, heir of Denethor, captain of the White Tower, and of like mind was Boromir. Yet it proved otherwise at the test. So as seen there, Boromir was a strong and protective brother to Faramir, and this help shows that their relationship was always strong. Then the years would continue as they both grew to become men, and over the next 30 years Boromir would grow as a soldier and become one of the greatest commanders in the histories of Gondor, after winning and leading many battles against the enemies of Gondor. And as we reached the year 3018 of the Third Age, Boromir's brother Faramir would twice have a dream that he did not speak of. That is until the same dream would come to Boromir as well. After speaking together, neither could understand too much of the words that came to them, but here is the passage of how Boromir describes it to the Council of Elrond in the Fellowship of the Ring. "In this evil hour I have come on an errand over many dangerous leagues to Elrond. 110 days I have journeyed all alone, but I do not seek allies in war. The might of Elrond is in wisdom, not in weapons, it is said. I come to ask for counsel and the unravelling of hard words. For on the eve of the sudden assault a dream came to my brother in a troubled sleep, and afterwards a like dream came oft to him again, and once to me. In that dream I thought the eastern sky grew dark, and there was a growing thunder, but in the west a pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear, crying, 'Seek for the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken, stronger than Morgold's spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand.' Of these words we could understand little, and we spoke to our father, Denethor, Lord of Minas Tirith, wise in the lore of Gondor. This only would he say, that Imladris was of old the name among the elves of a far northern dale, where Elrond the half-elven dwelt, greatest of lore-masters. However, before we get too much into what comes from this reveal to the council, we have a few events to fill you in on before Boromir even got to Rivendell. So, if we go back to the day after Boromir and Faramir discussed their vision, then Sauron would set in motion his initial plans, as, on June 20th, 3018, an attack on Osgiliath would be launched. When looking at the book of the Unfinished Tales of Númenor and Middle-earth, we learn that Sauron had hoped to alarm and distract the councils of his enemies by starting a war, even though he had not really planned to start this war just yet himself. But, to help his plan, Sauron decided to launch simultaneous attacks on both Thranduil in Mirkwood and on Gondor too. The main thinking behind these attacks was twofold. One, so that he could capture or kill the creature Gollum, whichever method stopped his enemies from taking him. And two, to test the strength that Gondor held while securing the passage of the Bridge of Osgiliath, so that the Nazgul could be able to cross. Sauron's plan mostly worked, but not completely though, as Gollum managed to escape out of the clutches of the elves just like he had hoped, but not to the point that Sauron could capture or kill him himself, and the bridge was not so easily taken. Sauron had underestimated the valour that was held in Gondor, with Boromir leading their defence. In the end, this meant that Boromir and Faramir were able to drive their enemies back and destroy the bridge, preventing Sauron's forces from using it at all. Although, 8 of the Nazgul had managed to sneak across it in the night to go on their hunt. But the men of Gondor were unaware of this, as the Nazgul had other missions than to deal with them, so they felt that they had really earned their victory. But Sauron had succeeded with his goal too. From this battle, it was in fact only Boromir, Faramir, and 2 other soldiers of Gondor who had managed to survive the assault, having to swim away at the end to save their lives. But, at least for now, from the perspective of Gondor, they had at least a small victory over the re-emergent Sauron and Witch King. A couple more weeks would pass after this battle, and both Boromir and Faramir continued to be troubled by the prophetic dreams that they had. They wished to set out for this Imladris for answers, of which they learned was also more commonly known as Rivendell due to the knowledge of Denethor. However, that journey would be no simple walk into Mordor. It would be long, dangerous, and full of testing moments. And so, Boromir knew he could not let his brother go on this journey, and he decided he must be the one to take on this quest himself. And so, Boromir sets out from Minas Tirith on July 4th, and will not arrive in Rivendell until the 24th of October, 3 months later. When Boromir made his great journey from Gondor to Rivendell, the courage and hardihood required is not fully recognised in the narrative. The north-south road no longer existed except for the crumbling remains of the causeways, by which a hazardous approach to Tharbad might be achieved, only to find ruins on dwindling mounds, and a dangerous ford formed by the ruins of the bridge, impassable if the river had not been there slow and shallow, but wide. So as we get the idea of there, Boromir would pass through the Gap of Rohan and travel through the lands west of the Misty Mountains, trying to take the north-south road that no longer existed except for crumbling remains of the old causeways. Boromir would lose his horse while crossing the Graveflood, so he would then have to tackle the remainder of his journey on foot. But despite the struggle, 110 days after leaving Minas Tirith, Boromir would finally step foot in Rivendell during the night. Boromir's timing would be a convenient thing as well, for not long after his arrival he would attend the Council of Elrond, and here he revealed his dream to the others as I showed in the quote earlier in the video. Also during this council, Boromir learns of the likes of the ranger known as Aragorn, the shards of Narsil, the hobbit Frodo Baggins, the One Ring, of which he knew of as Isildur's Bane, and much more. In fact, it was a thing to behold for Boromir when he first set eyes on a hobbit, as the Unfinished Tales book tells us. Thus, no halfling, so far as is known, had ever actually appeared in Gondor before Peregrine Took. The existence of this people within the Kingdom of Arthedain was known in Gondor, and they were given the name Halfling. As soon as Frodo was brought to Boromir's notice at the Council of Elrond, he recognised him as a member of this race. He had probably until then regarded them as creatures of what we should call fairy tales or folklore. Boromir would not just learn from the council, but also tell them of the current struggles in Gondor, but also their vigilance as no force from Mordor had yet crossed the Anduin in their realm. After all, he had not come all this way to ask for reinforcements in the shape of soldiers, but instead for counsel on his and Faramir's vision. After learning the answers to his riddle, Boromir wished to take the One Ring back with him to Gondor to use it to defeat their enemy. However, this was of course turned down. After all, the One Ring could only be truly wielded by Sauron, and Sauron alone. However much it may have been the intention of a different user to do good with it, it could just not be used for good in any shape or form. It would always twist the deeds and good intentions to evil, jealousy, and corrupt the mind. And so, Boromir had received the answers that he had travelled all that way for, and so his intention now was to return home to Minas Tirith. After all, the war was still going on and he had his people to defend. However, this would mean, at least for a time, that Boromir would decide to join the Fellowship of the Ring, at least for as long as it took them to pass by Minas Tirith on his way home. And so, on December 25th, 3018, Boromir and the Fellowship of the Ring set out from Rivendell. From Rivendell, the Fellowship would set out east, with their first challenge coming when they reached the tallest peak of the Misty Mountains, Caradhras. Here, Boromir showed his first example of leadership to the group by telling them that they should all carry a faggot of wood, as the cold weather could be deadly up there. This ended up being a saving grace for the company, as they did indeed get caught by the cold weather, with them in fact getting caught in a blizzard. It even got so bad that both Boromir and Aragorn had to physically carry the hobbits back down the mountain when they realised that the Redhorn Pass was unpassable. With that way no longer an option, Boromir suggested to the group that they should travel south down to the Gap of Rohan or the Isen, so that they could then go through the lands to the south and onwards to Minas Tirith. However, this was declined by Gandalf, saying how due to Saruman's now open treachery that way would not be safe or wise for them to take. It was instead thought that they should pass through the mines of Moria, under the mountains. However, not being one to not get his point across, Boromir made it clear to the group that he was 100% against this idea, and said that the only way he would take that path was if all 8 of the other members voted against him, which they did. So, Boromir and the Fellowship reached the doors of Durin, and here he grew frustrated and angry, as despite the others forcing him to come to this accursed spot, as he called it, Gandalf did not actually know the password to get inside the mines. With Gandalf not yet discovering the secret words, and the sounds of wolves being brought to them by the wind, Boromir stooped down in frustration, picked up a large stone and threw it into the dark waters. This stone would alert and wake up one of the nameless things that lived beneath Moria, the Watcher in the Water. The Watcher attacked the group, and despite a close call with it grabbing Frodo by the foot, they all managed to escape its clutches and make their way into the mines, with no method of retreat now open behind them. Boromir and the Fellowship pass through Moria and are then attacked when they reach the Chamber of Mizarble. They all survive this initial assault and escape to the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, where they are attacked once again by a group of orcs, except this time there is also one of the corrupted Maiar of Morgoth, a Balrog. Gandalf confronts this Balrog on the bridge, where Boromir tries to run towards him to help, showing his true courage in the face of any enemy. But Gandalf breaks the bridge and he and the Balrog fall into the depths below. From here, Boromir and the remaining Fellowship move out of the mines and then into Lothlorien, despite Boromir also being against this idea. As these lands had a mysterious and dangerous reputation back in Gondor, Boromir was very untrusting of what may appear to them, asking them all, is there no other way? But again, the group votes against him, as Aragorn explains it is either forwards through Lorien or backwards back to Moria Gate and the mountains. The company then meet with some of the Lorien elves and are led into their lands. They meet the Lady of Lorien, Galadriel, and Boromir finds the whole experience exceedingly strange, as though she had been trying to tempt each of them while reading their thoughts.
Maybe it was only a test, and she thought to read our thoughts for her own good purpose, but almost I should have said that she was tempting us, and offering what she pretended to have the power to give. It need not be said that I refused to listen. The men of Minas Tirith are true to their word, but what he thought that the lady had offered him, Boromir, did not tell. And as for Frodo, he would not speak, though Boromir pressed him with the questions. She held you long in her gaze, Ringbearer, he said.
Yes, said Frodo, but whatever came into my mind then, I will keep there.
Well, have a care, said Boromir. I do not feel too sure of this elvish lady and her purposes.
Boromir is then warned by Aragorn to speak no evil of the Lady Galadriel, for her and her land possess no evil, that is, unless a man brings the evil himself. Nonetheless, Boromir is never fully trusting of this place, but the Fellowship would remain here for a few days before setting off again. And before the group leave, each of them is given a gift by Galadriel, as this is where Frodo receives the phial that caught the light of Eärendil's star, and Boromir receives a bout of gold. From here, the next part of their journey involves them sailing down the Anduin, with Boromir sharing his boat with Merry and Pippin. The two hobbits became increasingly wary of Boromir as they sailed along, for Boromir was becoming more and more affected by the draw of the One Ring, having an unusual glint in his eye when he looked at Frodo, as well as sitting and muttering to himself, biting his nails as if some restless or doubt consumed him. He even has an unusual moment of trying to see Frodo after the situation with Legolas shooting down a dark shape moving above them in the sky. He is falling further and further away from the noble man that had left Minas Tirith the longer that he stays within proximity to Frodo and the One Ring. The Fellowship then shortly after reach and camp at Parth Galen, close to Amon Hen and the high seat that sits upon it, with them trying to decide what their next direction should be. Yet again, Boromir and Aragorn disagree on what their next path should be, with Boromir again wanting to take the most direct path towards his lands, and Aragorn not wishing to abandon their boats until they have no other choice. However, with Boromir realising that Frodo will choose to stay with Aragorn whatever he decides, he backs down. When the company was resting, Frodo gets up and wanders off to give himself some time to think alone, but Boromir could not take his eyes off of Frodo, and so he follows. Frodo felt as though unfriendly eyes were watching him, and he came to see Boromir staring at him, but with a face that at least appeared kind and smiling. He sits with Frodo under the veil of counsel and kindness. That is until the One Ring is mentioned.
Ah, the ring, said Boromir, his eyes lighting. The ring! Is it not a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt for so small a thing? So small a thing. And I have seen it only for an instant in the House of Elrond. Could I not have sight of it again? Frodo looked up. His heart went suddenly cold. He caught the strange gleam in Boromir's eyes, yet his face was still kind and friendly. It is best that it should lie hidden, he answered.
Boromir attempts to persuade Frodo to bring the ring to Minas Tirith, with the poison of the ring getting an ever greater hold upon him. Boromir becomes enraged then and even tries to take the ring from Frodo when he does not agree, but Frodo manages to put on the ring and escape from his grasp. As Frodo gets away, Boromir becomes overwhelmed with the realization of his actions. He is appalled with himself. He weeps and calls for Frodo to come back and for forgiveness, but it is too late. Upon returning to the others, Boromir, looking grim and sad, did not reveal the whole truth to them all of what had really just happened. And then, when Merry and Pippin go off in search of Frodo, Boromir is sent to watch out for them and guard the two hobbits. This is where the company are ambushed by orcs and uruks of Saruman. Boromir initially saves Merry and Pippin after they become surrounded. Boromir kills many of the orcs, but their numbers are too great. Boromir blows on the horn of Gondor, doing all he can to protect the hobbits, trying to gain redemption for the monster that he had unwittingly become. However, he could not maintain his effort as arrows are shot at him, piercing his body several times. It is not just one arrow that brings down this great warrior, as it takes several to finally stop him, doing everything he can to protect Merry and Pippin. This is Boromir's final moment to really show what a great warrior and leader he truly was. With Boromir now mortally wounded though, the orcs take Merry and Pippin captive, and Boromir is left to die where he fell. However, just before Boromir would take his final breath, Aragorn manages to find him, and Boromir reveals the real truth of what happened between him and Frodo. He asks for forgiveness, for he gave in to the power of the ring, which Aragorn gladly grants him before he takes his final breath. And so, on February 26, 3019, Boromir, son of Denethor, passes on, with his horn being said to have been heard all the way in Minas Tirith on that final day. Boromir died in the way that sums up his true, uncorrupted character, fighting evil and defending the more vulnerable until his body had no more strength to do so. Although he gave in to the temptation and his will could not resist, he was still a powerful warrior, a great leader, and a good man. His body would then be sent over the falls of Rauros on a funeral boat, as Aragorn and Legolas sing a lament to him as well. And then later, 3 days later in fact, his brother Faramir would see the funeral boat sailing past him as he once again heard a blast from the horn of Gondor, and it is unclear if he really did see this boat or if it all came in a vision. But either way, Faramir brought the devastating news back to his family. So there we have it, a look into the full story of Boromir of Gondor, the eldest son of Denethor and Finduilas and brother of Faramir. He was one of the 9 members of the Fellowship of the Ring, and despite falling to the power of the One Ring in his last days, at heart he was truly a powerful warrior, a brilliant leader, and a caring friend. It is little surprise he did fall to the corruption of the Ring, when every decision that needed to be made he was voted against, when all he was trying to do was return home to look after his people. And so, with that look into the High Warden of the White Tower, it is now time for my question for you all today, and that is, do you think Boromir was truly a great man? Or do you think perhaps the One Ring just brought out his true nature instead? Let me know all of your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section below. And now that we've reached the end, I would also like to remind you all, please check out our other channels, the Tabletop Alliance, the 6th Ranger, and History of Dragon Ball. Links for all of those channels will, of course, be in the description below. And now, time to shout at our patrons. Firstly, we have our Divine Power team members of Kevin, Abram, Matt, and Glorfindel of Gondolin. You are all awesome. And a big thank you to our Fire Demon team members of Nashith, Denver Steel, and Gregory. And as well, I cannot forget the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew, and Pirate747 as well. Every single one of you is a true legend of the Bro Hero. And finally, if you have not already as well, please do all that great stuff. Hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel. You know all the amazing things to do by now, as all of these massively help us out with that YouTube algorithm. So, thank you once more if you have managed to reach the very end of this video with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.